going to be doing a Marabou jig. If you go on YouTube and you look up a Marabou jig, you're going to see all kinds of varieties. The most common will have a lead head. You've seen crappie jigs. They'll have a feather on them. That's what a lot of people call a Marabou jig. I know the folks that fish the tailwaters and over at Roaring River will use a micro jig. It's got a little tiny lead head, like 1/124th ounce. And it's the same basic concept, although the feather material is a lot more sparse than what we're going to be doing today. Those little 1/124th ounce lead head jigs are pretty pricey. And what we're going to do today is we're going to weight this fly with lead, just like we have done in the past. We're going to use Marabou, and instead of a lead head, we'll have the lead weight, and we'll have a nice, neat little head. Sometimes you will see a lead head, sometimes you'll see a bead head. There are all kinds of colors and options available. The color pattern that seems to be the most productive at Roaring River is a peach and olive. So we're going to put that together. Hope you got materials up here for that. We'll put that together. Now, I would anticipate you're going to have two problems today with this pattern. One, you're going to have the head is going to end up growing further and further back toward the bend. And it'll still work, but I'm a bit anal. I like a smaller head. I've got an example here. We can pass that around. I put the peach Marabou on the bottom because most fish, the bottom of the fish is a lighter color than the top of the fish. But this has been a productive pattern at Roaring River, and we've also caught that same color pattern at Rockbridge. Works at Rockbridge. But this is a wet fly, and that Marabou, when it gets wet, man, it looks really, it just undulates in the water. It's a really good looking little pattern. The second problem you're going to have is one I call a proportion issue. I still have some problems with proportion. You want the Marabou to extend past the bend of the fly about the length of the hook shaft itself. And you're either going to be short or you're going to have a tendency to be way, way long. If you're way, way long, do not cut the Marabou. Use your fingernail and forefinger to shorten it if you have to, but if you cut it, it's going to look terrible. If you break it off, the breaks will be kind of irregular, and it will look a little bit better. But the best thing to do is to get your proportion right from the get-go. And I'll show you a couple of ways to lay this Marabou on that will help you get that proportion pretty close the first time. Okay, I'm going to tie one. Just watch. I'm going to use some 20/100 lead, and then I'll go back and we'll do another one step by step. Now I've got my hook in place, and I'm going to put lead on. I'm going to hold it behind the hook like we've done in the past. Now I'm going to make probably about 12 wraps of 20/100 lead. And I'm just going to break that off like we've done in the past. I don't want to waste any of that, so I'm going to wrap that pigtail around, and I'm going to center that, and notice I'm leaving quite a bit of space on the front behind the eye. Then we're going to have to put some thread on. This is a little bit different than the instruction book. The instruction book says start in front of the lead. I do not like starting in front of the lead. I have better luck starting behind the lead. I'm going to make sure I got my thread tied in. Now I'm going to get rid of that because I don't want to sit there and hold that thread all day. And this is going to be kind of reminiscent of the fly we did last week. It involves a lot of wrapping because the body of our fly is essentially the lead, and we're going to cover that up with thread so that the body is going to be just a solid black. Now if you notice, I'm trying to build the thread volume about the height of the lead. There's a reason for that. And then I'm going to go back over the lead. I've got my, somehow I got a little tag end to thread there for some reason. I'm going to build that up near the height of my lead. And then this is just wrap until you've got your lead covered. And notice I am leaving that pretty close to the eye, but about the eye of the hook at least, back beyond. And now we're ready to start attaching the marabou. Now,
Can you show us how, now you're gonna cut that marabou, aren't you?
yes, sir.
Can you show us
Okay.
that in the video?
Now I've got, you see I've got a little strand of marabou here, okay? And I don't need all that much. So I'm going to squeeze that back, and that's about the length of my hook, maybe a little bit longer, okay? Now there are a couple ways you can do this. I've just got a little bit of bulk. I got a little bit too much marabou, so I'm going to thin that out a little bit because those barbs aren't going all the way to the tail anyway. Now there are two ways that you can attach this. One way is to leave this tag end on and make an easy wrap over that. And that first wrap, if that's where you want the end of your head to be, you can't go to the left of that wrap. That's one way. Then you can lift this tag end up and cut it. And if you cut it, you want to kind of cut it at an uphill angle. I think it might be easier for you guys when you first start this stuff to leave the stem attached because you can adjust it that way. So I've got another piece of marabou here, and I'm going to say, okay, that's about where I want it. So I'm going to make my wraps right there. I want to keep it on the top. I don't want to go any further back with my head. And I'm going to make sure I've got that attached good. And then I'm going to take my scissors. Do not cut your thread or you'll say bad words. And cut that off. Notice I kind of cut it uphill. And then I'm going to just make a few more wraps. And I'm going to bring my thread back. And there's my bottom layer. I think it works easier if you leave the stem attached. Then I'm going to take my olive, and I'm going to be doing the same thing. I'm going to strip. You see I've stripped a lot of so it's just the stems left here. And I'm going to do the same thing I did. I'm going to lay that to where it's right on top, and I can judge the length very well by doing it this way. Grab it with my left hand. I'm going to make a wrap, get it cinched in there really good, and I'm going to have plenty of room that I can make my head. I can go back a little bit because of where I grabbed it. And this, again, I'm going to try and cut uphill. Okay? And now I've got both colors on. And the only problem you're going to have cutting it off there is your head gets a little bit blunt appearing. But you notice my head is nice and small. And I usually bring a black magic marker. It will cover up a myriad of mistakes. Okay, but I've got a nice small, this happened to me yesterday. You notice that my wrappings came undone? It's because the head is going downhill. So when you cover up, you're going to have a tendency, your thread's going to want to slip downhill. So when you're ready to tie that off, you want to make sure you're tying off at the very back of your head. Okay? Now I'm going to use my whip finish. You can do this with whip finish or the knot that's in your booklet by hand, but this whip finish, I can place my wraps precisely where I want them. And how many have got sort of a handle on the whip finish already? Okay, we need to have a day where we just sit down and do whip finish, because that's an important skill to have. All right, now I'm going to cut that off, and if you will kind of wet your fingertips, you can keep that marabou back and out of the way so that you can put your head cement on the head. I don't have a rotary vise here, so this one doesn't rotate at all. So I'm kind of doing this by gosh and by golly. I think I've got a little bit of head cement on there. Now, I don't know if you can see it. I'll blow this up a little bit. Okay, getting focused too far. There you go. I've got a little bit of fuzz from my marabou. This is another tool that comes in very handy. You can get this at Hobby Lobby and pay a whole lot less, or you can order it from one of the fly tackle distributors and pay about twice as much. It's just a little zapper. You press that and the end gets red hot, and I can see a little bit of thread right there. I don't know if you saw a little smoke go up, but I got that little tag end out of the way by using that. That's something that, not something you have to have, but it will come in handy every now and then if you're working, especially if you're working with marabou. And that is a Marabou jig.
Okay, leave it right there for a minute.
Okay?